Buying my first home should have been the happiest moment of my life. And, in a way, it was. I remember standing alone in the living room on the very first night, keys still warm in my hand, listening to the quiet hum of the house and realizing something hit different about this place. It wasn't big. It wasn't flashy. But it was mine. Every wall, every floorboard, every square inch paid for with years of sacrifice, overtime shifts, and saying no when everyone else said yes. I didn't grow up with stability. My parents, Mark and Linda, made sure of that. From the time I was old enough to work, they treated me less like a son and more like a backup plan. A financial cushion, a safety net they could dip into whenever things got tight. While other kids had parents driving them to games, helping with college applications, or teaching them how to save, I was figuring things out alone. By 16, I had a part-time job. By 17, my parents were already borrowing from me. It always started small. Gas money. Rent was late. Something broke. The promises were always the same. We'll pay you back. Family helps family. But the money never returned. Not once. Even after all that, I wasn't cruel. I told myself that helping people, even when they didn't deserve it, was just who I was. But I also learned something important early on. If I didn't set boundaries, my parents would take everything and still ask for more. So when I finally bought my house, I hesitated before telling them. A part of me hoped, stupidly, that this would be different, that they'd be proud. That maybe, just once, they'd say the words I'd waited my whole life to hear. I'm proud of you. Against my better judgment, I invited them to the housewarming party. The night started perfectly. My friends showed up with small gifts, cheap wine, laughter filling the space. People complimented the place, joked about future barbecues, told me how happy they were for me. For the first time, I felt like I had built something real. Something no one could take from me. Then my parents arrived. The energy shifted instantly. My mom walked through the front door like she was inspecting a purchase. Her hand dragged slowly along the wall, her eyes scanning every corner. "Wow," she said, nodding. "This is perfect. Just the right size for us." I laughed, assuming it was a joke. Then my dad smiled and added, "Yeah, finally living somewhere nice. Beats that dump we're stuck in. Thanks for buying us a house, son." The laughter around us wasn't real. It was nervous. Forced. And my stomach dropped. They weren't joking. As the night went on, the comments kept coming. My mom casually claimed what would be their bedroom. My dad talked about knocking down walls. They asked my friends about resale value like this was some kind of shared investment. I smiled through it, embarrassed, hoping it would stop. It didn't. By dessert, my parents pulled me aside near the kitchen. The smiles were gone. The tone changed. This wasn't playful anymore. "You know," my dad said, leaning against the counter, "we've been thinking. Family helps family." My mom nodded eagerly. "We raised you. Gave you life. Giving us the house is the least you can do." I felt my chest tighten. My hands started shaking, but my voice stayed calm. "No," I said. "This house is mine. I worked for it. I paid for it. I'm not giving it to anyone." The silence that followed felt heavy. Dangerous. My mom's face hardened instantly. "You don't say no to family." "Yes, I do," I replied. "You don't own me. And you don't own this house." Something snapped. My mom grabbed the curtains and yanked them down so hard the fabric ripped. My dad slammed doors, knocked over furniture, threw decorative items onto the floor. Guests froze. Some backed away. Others started recording. My cousin Emily started crying. I stood there in shock as everything I worked for was treated like trash. I realized arguing was pointless. This wasn't about logic. It was about control, about entitlement. And it wasn't going to stop unless I stopped it. So I called the police. When the officers arrived, my parents tried to guilt-trip me, yelling about betrayal and family loyalty. The officers weren't interested. They surveyed the damage, listened calmly, and then told my parents they were officially trespassed. If they came back, they'd be arrested. Watching them escorted out was surreal, painful, but freeing. Afterward, my friends helped clean up. Broken items, torn curtains, scratched floors. And in that moment, I realized something that changed everything. Family isn't blood. Family is who shows up when things fall apart. And that was only the beginning, because what my parents didn't know was that I was finally done letting anyone take what I earned. The house felt different once the police left. Not empty quiet. The kind of quiet that settles into your bones after chaos burns itself out. The front door was locked, the lights were still on, and the place looked wounded but standing. Curtains torn. A chair cracked. Scratches across the floor like scars. But it was still mine. My friends didn't leave right away. Nobody asked what I wanted to do. They just stayed. One of them grabbed a trash bag. Another picked up glass. Someone put on music low, like we were afraid to disturb the peace that had finally arrived. Emily stopped crying and sat next to me on the couch, holding my arm like she was afraid I'd disappear too. That night, I didn't sleep much. Every sound made my heart jump. I kept replaying my parents' faces when the officers told them to leave. The rage, the disbelief, the way my mom screamed that I was ungrateful, that I'd regret this, that I was nothing without them. Those words used to work on me. They didn't anymore. The next morning, I walked through the house slowly, daylight exposing everything the night had hidden. The damage was worse than I remembered. Furniture scratched. Decorations shattered. A bookshelf tipped over like it had been shoved in anger. I took photos of everything, every tear, every crack, every mess. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I finally understood something important. If you don't protect yourself, no one else will. I filed a police report. I contacted my insurance. I documented everything, and when my phone started buzzing with messages from my parents, I didn't respond. They called. They texted. They left voicemails that bounced between apology and accusation. You embarrassed us. You overreacted. We're still your parents. You owe us. That last one stuck with me, because it summed up everything they believed. A week later, I met with an attorney. Not because I wanted to sue them into oblivion, but because I needed clarity, protection. A line in the sand that couldn't be crossed again. The lawyer listened quietly as I explained everything, nodding like this wasn't the first time he'd heard a story like mine. You did the right thing, he said, and you should press charges. Saying it out loud felt heavy. These were still my parents, but they had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. They destroyed my property. They trespassed. They tried to intimidate me into giving up my home. Love doesn't look like that. So I pressed charges. Mark and Linda didn't go to jail. The court didn't see them as hardened criminals, but they were ordered to pay for the damages. Every ripped curtain, every broken item, every repair. They were furious. They told everyone who would listen that I had turned against my own family. I didn't correct them. I went no contact. At first, it hurt more than I expected. You don't just cut off your parents without feeling something rip inside you. Even toxic bonds leave scars. There were nights I stared at my phone, wondering if I was cruel, if I'd gone too far, if maybe I should have just given them what they wanted and avoided all this pain. But then I'd walk through my house, I'd sit on my couch. I'd breathe. And I'd remember why I bought it in the first place. Stability, safety, peace. Over the next few months, life got quieter. Better. I installed cameras, changed the locks, added security lights. Friends came over more often. The house started to feel like a home again, not a battleground. And just when I thought the worst chapter of my life was behind me, I got a phone call. A man's voice. Calm, confused. "Hello, is this Jason Miller?" "Yes. I think there's been some kind of mistake. I bought your house." I laughed at first. I thought it was a scam. Then he said the address. My address. My heart dropped. I drove straight to the county courthouse, convinced this was some clerical error, something that would be fixed in minutes. Instead, the clerk pulled up the records and frowned. "It says here your property was foreclosed on," she said. "Foreclosed? That's impossible. I don't have a mortgage. It was foreclosed by the HOA." I stared at her. "I'm not in an HOA." She turned the screen toward me. According to the records, I was. 15 years of unpaid HOA fees. Notices sent. Voicemails left. Final warnings ignored. The house sold for a fraction of its value. Gone. I felt sick. I drove to the HOA office next. A small building. Bland. Unremarkable. Inside, a woman with long acrylic nails barely looked up from her desk. "Yes?" she said. "They foreclosed my house," I said, placing the documents in front of her. "There has to be a mistake." She glanced at the papers and slid them back toward me. "No mistake," she said. "You didn't pay your HOA fees. I'm not part of your HOA." She laughed. Actually laughed. "Sure you are. We sent hundreds of letters. I never got one." She rolled her eyes. "That's what they all say. I told her I would fight it. She told me I should have moved out weeks ago." That night, I barely slept again. My wife and I sat at the kitchen table, documents spread out, trying to understand how something like this could even happen. How a home we owned outright could be taken without us knowing. The next morning, we called a lawyer who specialized in HOA disputes. He dug. And the more he dug, the worse it got. Missing documentation. No proof of notices. No verified delivery. Complaints stacked online from other homeowners. Data breaches. Shady practices. "This HOA is a mess," he said. And they picked the wrong house. We filed a lawsuit that day. And then, against better judgment, we shared our story online. The response was instant. Explosive. People came out of the woodwork with similar stories. Warnings. Support. Rage directed squarely at the HOA. 2 days later, someone from the HOA knocked on our door. "We'd like to handle this privately," she said. "You're upsetting people." I laughed. "You sold my house," I said. "We'll handle this in court." She tried to block the door. I slammed it shut. And that's when they knew. They were in real trouble. Because this time, I wasn't standing alone anymore. The courtroom didn't look dramatic. No towering pillars. No tense music. Just wooden benches, fluorescent lights, and the quiet hum of people waiting for their turn to have their lives picked apart. Still, my stomach twisted as my wife and I sat down. This was it. Months of stress, sleepless nights, and fear boiled down to a single room and one judge. The man who bought our house was already there. His name was Daniel Thompson, mid-40s. Polite, nervous. He walked over before the hearing even started and apologized. Said he had no idea anything shady was going on. He thought he'd found the deal of a lifetime. A fully paid-off house sold cheap after foreclosure. He showed us the paperwork he'd been given. On the surface, it all looked legitimate. We told him we didn't blame him, and we meant it. The HOA representative arrived last. Same woman from the office. Same long nails. Same look of irritation, like this whole thing was an inconvenience to her schedule. She didn't look worried. If anything, she looked annoyed, like people who believe rules only exist for others. The judge entered, and everything became very real. Our lawyer laid it all out. The surprise foreclosure, the total lack of notice, the 15 years of silence, the sudden sale. He presented records showing no certified letters, no verified mail, no proof of contact, just claims. Empty claims. Then it was the HOA's turn. The woman stood confidently. "We sent hundreds of letters," she said. "Multiple warnings, voicemails, final notices. The homeowners ignored us." The judge leaned forward. "Do you have proof of delivery?" She hesitated. "Well, we don't keep records that far back." "So you have no evidence," the judge replied flatly. She tried to recover. Their silence implied understanding. "We clearly outlined the consequences." The judge raised an eyebrow. "Silence is not consent, especially when someone claims they never received notice." The room felt heavier by the second. The judge flipped through the documents slowly. Painfully, slowly. "According to these records," he said, "this property was fully paid off. No mortgage, no liens, no previous disputes." He looked directly at the HOA representative. "You sold a house without sufficient proof of delinquency, without verified notice, without due process." She opened her mouth to argue. He raised his hand. "I've seen enough." My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. "I rule in favor of the plaintiffs," the judge said. "The foreclosure is void. The sale is reversed. The property is to be returned to the original owners immediately." Relief hit me like a wave. But he wasn't done. "Additionally," he continued, "due to emotional distress, financial hardship, and time lost from work caused by this negligence, the HOA will pay damages totaling $300,000. The HOA representative's face drained of color. My wife squeezed my hand, hard. The judge addressed Daniel next, assuring him he would be refunded in full and acknowledging that he had been misled. Daniel nodded, visibly relieved that this nightmare wasn't going to end with him being blamed. When it was over, the courtroom buzzed quietly. Papers shuffled. People stood. And just like that, the worst months of our lives ended. Outside, Daniel laughed shakily and said, "Drinks are on me." We accepted. Sitting there afterward, I felt something strange. Not triumph, not revenge. Closure. The kind you don't get often in life. The HOA tried to appeal. They lost. Quietly. The story faded from public attention, but the consequences didn't. That HOA dissolved within a year. Too many lawsuits. Too many skeletons. Our house stayed ours. And peace returned. Or at least, I thought it had. Because not long after that, I heard another story, one that stuck with me. One that reminded me entitlement doesn't always come from parents or organizations. Sometimes it comes from people who smile to your face while standing on your back. A guy named Ryan told it. Ryan was in college. Group project. Big grade. You know how those go. Everyone promises to help. No one actually does. Except Ryan. He researched everything, built the presentation, made the slides, created the talking points, scheduled meetings that no one showed up for. He begged. He reminded. He tried being nice. Tried being firm. Nothing. The night before the presentation, he asked them to meet one last time. Not one person showed. That's when Ryan stopped being polite. See, the rule said if you missed the presentation without an excuse, you failed automatically. If you had an excuse, you needed proof. Documentation. Ryan lived an hour away. He commuted. So that morning, he bought a tire, kept the receipt, took photos, emailed the professor. "Flat tire," he wrote, "won't make it. I can present alone later." The professor agreed. Ryan's group had no choice but to present without him. They bombed. Badly. They didn't know the material, couldn't answer questions. Stumbled through the slides Ryan had made without understanding a word of it. Ryan presented later. Alone. Calm. Prepared. He passed. They didn't. Was it petty? Absolutely. Was it deserved? Without question. And that's when everything clicked for me. Entitlement thrives when people expect access to your time, money, effort, or success without contributing anything themselves. Parents who think their child owes them a house. HOAs that think paperwork excuses theft. Group members who think someone else will carry them. They all rely on the same thing: you not standing up. The moment you do, everything changes. People call you selfish, difficult, cold, ungrateful. But what they really mean is this: you stopped letting me take from you. And that makes them uncomfortable. Today, I still live in that house. I sit on the porch some evenings and think about how close I came to losing everything. Not because I failed, but because others felt entitled to what I built. I don't talk to my parents anymore. That door closed for good. And while that still hurts sometimes, the peace is worth it. My wife and I are stronger, safer, wiser. And if there's one thing I've learned through all of this, it's simple. Kindness without boundaries is just self-destruction. You can be generous. You can be loving. You can be compassionate. But the moment someone demands what you earned instead of respecting it, that's the moment you say no. And don't apologize for it. Because owning your story, your home, your work, your life is something no entitled person ever deserves to take from you. And if you've ever dealt with an entitled parent, a power-hungry HOA, or anyone who tried to claim what you worked for, I want to hear your story. Drop it in the comments and tell me what you would have done in my place. If you enjoyed this kind of real-world lesson wrapped in a wild story, hit like so the algorithm doesn't bury it, and subscribe to the HOA Files because we've got new episodes every week. Turn on the bell so you don't miss the next one, because, trust me, the next story is even crazier.